Welcome to Curious Goldfish, a podcast community where music and curiosity come together through interesting conversations with the music makers of our world. I'm your host, Jason English. You can find Curious Goldfish in all the major podcast and social media platforms, and of course, we have all of our content on our website, curiousgoldfish.com. Will, it's a pleasure to meet you.
You too, Jason.
Seriously, thanks for your time. You're probably one of the busiest guys down here at 30A, but thanks for taking the time for me.
Oh, man. Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're here over the Gulf. I guess, is it going to be the Gulf of America? Is that what I'm hearing? I don't know. We don't have to go there, right?
My favorite is the Gulf of Buc-ee's.
The Gulf of Buc-ee's. Okay, I can.
You know, like a stadium. It's got a brand.
Yeah.
People paying for it.
Yeah, I can sign up for that. No, that's good.
It's
all right.
The Gulf of Mexico.
Gulf of Mexico. All right. Well, it's beautiful, and we're here at the 30A Songwriters Festival that I think you're a veteran of. What keeps bringing you back?
I-65. Getting to see my fellow songwriters is really a big part of it.
Yeah.
And for the last 10 or 12 years, I've been coming down and staying at my cousin's house in Seagrove and having a family reunion in addition to a songwriter reunion. I mean, like last night I was hanging out with Josh Rouse, who I played with 20 years ago. And of course, we always see Steve Poltz, you know, for many years, Darden Smith. I mean, there's so many people. Gretchen Peters, she's not here this year because she's in Scotland at the festival, Celtic Connections. But anyway, the point being, it's a reunion with fellow artists and fellow travelers in the songwriting world, and you get to be on the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
Golfo de Mexico.
Right. Yeah, it's beautiful here.
Yeah,
it's absolutely,
it really is.
And we lucked out on the weather today.
Oh, man, yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I guess whether they're here at the festival or not, I mean, you play with so many different people.
Yeah.
You know, is there anyone that you're listening to now that it's maybe under the radar that's like, okay, they're the shit? Who would you recommend right now?
Oh, man, there's so many people. You know, if you haven't heard or seen live Sierra Ferrell, I mean, she's on the rise, and it's a lot of people know about her, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
So if you haven't, she's literally a force of nature, and she was a kind of a street singer in like West Virginia,
right,
of all places,
yeah.
And really, you know, people were hearing her and talking about her, and she's in Nashville now, and she's just killing it. So there's a lot of people, but there's just so many people. I don't know what to say. I'd really say, you know, go take a chance and go see somebody play, young or old or new or old, because there's so many people you've probably never heard, never seen live, and how bad could it be?
Well, yeah, no, that's a great point. I think I've been doing this podcast about a year.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked about, I don't know, 50 people or so. No matter where they are on the metrics and the algorithms and the likes and the followers, all of them are insanely talented. And so you can't really base
focusing on insanely.
Yeah,
just insane.
Yeah, insane. Yeah, no, you're right. But you know, it's given me confidence that I don't really need to know every song that a person sings or have ever heard of them to invest in a ticket to take a chance on somebody, because you never know what you're gonna come out with.
Yeah, and there's nothing like the live side of performance. I love to make records, and I love to make recordings, and I love to write, but performing the thing is really the heart and soul of it. And you know, the way the business that I'm in has evolved or devolved or whatever you want to call it, but live performance is more important than ever.
Yeah.
And there's more people out there doing it, and more people out there going to shows than ever. And like if you go see the Bob Dylan movie, or you have, you know, an older friend or relative who saw like the Beatles or somebody in the heyday, the excitement, you could on one hand say the excitement level is less because people are used to it. Everybody knows the Elvis, Beatles, Rolling Stones, Aretha Franklin, Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan, you know, John Coltrane, Miles Davis,
sure,
on and on and on. But if you actually go to the show, then you feel the energy, and the connection that people have between performer and audience.
Right.
is always there in its own way. So yeah, it's a special experience. And if you're into it, you know. If you know, you know.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, you need to get to know. So.
You need to get to know it, yeah. So you mentioned the Bob Dylan movie. I think when you saw it, you posted something on social media. And basically, if I remember correctly, it was your opinion that they got the music right.
I thought so. And also, I went to the movie with my wife and my mother-in-law and my father-in-law. And my mother-in-law saw Dylan. She grew up in New York, and she's in her late 70s. So when she was about 16, she saw Bob Dylan at Forest Hills, and that was about a month after Newport, which is famously in the movie.
Right.
And Bob Dylan went electric at Newport, and then he went electric at Forest Hills. Like in New York, no one had ever seen Bob Dylan. And, you know, you have to understand, too, New York was the center of the universe, especially of music at that time. So at the same time that Dylan was going electric, the Beatles were putting out Revolver. John Coltrane put out A Love Supreme. I could go on and on, but that's a lot right there, you know. What was happening in Memphis with Stax, you know, it's like the Byrds were out in L.A., and the bands like the Doors were just practicing. They hadn't made a record yet. Jimi Hendrix hadn't moved to England yet. And so my mother-in-law was sitting there watching it, and I kept watching the scenes and then looking over at her in the dark movie theater. And afterwards I said, it looked like you were really into it. And she's very critical and doesn't like everything. And she just loved it. And she used to go to those clubs, Garrity's Folk City and all that stuff, the Village Gate, and go see people like Dave Van Ronk, who influenced Dylan. And Dylan stole their arrangements of House of the Rising Sun and things like that. And she was just like, it was so beautiful how they recreated Greenwich Village at that time. She said they made it feel like it felt.
Oh, nice.
And so, you know, whatever criticisms I've seen of like, what part of it's fake? What part of it's real? It's like, well, for one thing, it's a movie.
Yeah, right.
It's all 100% fake.
Right. Right.
About something. And as my wife pointed out today, as we were walking on the beautiful beach here on the Gulf of Mexico, she said, it's a snapshot in time. It's like a 2-year period of this young person, you know, 60 years ago. It's a snapshot. Yeah. And you know, I think anyway.
Yeah, that's great.
Nobody cares what I think, but
well, no, like I care
because
you know what you're talking about, right? And as a layperson that doesn't play music, I was impressed with Timothée Chalamet and how it just immersed he became in that character with the guitar and the singing and everything was crazy, right?
Yeah, I thought they created a great snapshot of a snapshot. Yeah. Of a moment in time, and filmmakers have at it. Make more movies about that time.
Right.
Because it's a wonderful time to observe. Because I didn't get to.
No, for sure. Well, so I met a fellow Red Dirt boy, Phil Madera.
Oh yeah.
I talked to him at Americana Fest.
Yeah.
Or during Americana Fest in Nashville a few months ago, and so. Great guy. I mean, he's got a whole history with obviously music and, you know, religion and faith and the whole thing, I guess. And I want to ask you, not really about Emmylou, but what I asked him, which is, she seems the sweetest person ever. And he was like, everything you see, she's actually about, you know, it's times 10, right? Yeah. I guess. Is there a moment with Emmylou being part of her band recently that will always kind of stick out to you as like, okay, yeah, she's not only just an incredible artist, but just a great human?
There are many. I have a couple that are very recent. My eldest daughter adopted an elderly dog recently. And, of course, Emmylou, one of her passions in life is finding homes for strayed, you know, unhoused dogs, homeless dogs, and especially elderly dogs. And so I told Emmylou, my daughter got a dog. She goes, oh yeah, really? And I said, yeah, she adopted a 10-year-old dog, and she was like, oh my God, like she was so excited about that. And then we were out in San Francisco in October to play the Hardly Strictly Bluegrass Festival. It's a wonderful festival in Golden Gate Park, free concert for like a weekend. 100,000 people there. Oh, beautiful weather. We had beautiful weather. It's not always beautiful, but it was. Yeah. And we performed to close the festival, as she always does. Joan Baez came out on stage
Oh
because
my
they're
gosh.
pals. And so it tied me into the Bob Dylan movie,
Yeah, totally.
before I'd seen it. And she really had that, like, you really felt like this over 60 years of like global charisma coming off of her. Like she was with Martin Luther King. She was with, and she also was with Dylan, and she was, she was everywhere.
Yeah.
And she just, when she walked off stage, she like put her hand on my shoulder because I was just there, like on her path, and smiled like she was doing her thing. And I just felt like, she touched me, man. She smiled at me and touched me,
Yeah.
And then we were having maybe not the greatest show I've ever played with Emmylou. And I hopped off the front of the stage afterwards and was talking to some friends, and they were all like, man, that was the best show I've seen in years. Joan Baez. And she had just gotten up and sang harmony on a song.
Jeez.
But it transformed the morning, or the afternoon, into this thing people are going to remember forever.
That's
just
amazing.
because she was there.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and one more thing. At that same festival, like the day before, we were working up a song that I'm kind of sad to say we had never done before with her. One of my favorites, which is a Graham Parsons song called "The Return of the Grievous Angel," and that's the first place I heard Emmylou was singing with Graham Parsons on those two records, GP and Grievous Angel. And I love that song, and we've never done it. And I've always kind of like hinted, hey, why don't we ever do that one? She's like, oh, well, we'll do it someday. And so finally she says, let's do Grievous Angel. So I practiced it, and I'm going to sing the duet. I'm going to sing the Graham Parsons part.
Oh my gosh.
And I got to be honest, I wasn't even thinking about her wonderful version of it on her record. I was just listening to the Graham Parsons record and working it up. And so we were both playing on this stage on Saturday at the festival, Hardly Strictly Bluegrass. And I say, hey, we should rehearse that song, because we hadn't even done it at all.
Right.
We're playing the next day. And she goes, okay. So we're in this little tent about half the size of this porch, and there's Carlene Carter and Buddy Miller, and of course Emmylou's there. All these people, and Phil and all these great musicians are sitting around. Everybody's eating their sandwiches for lunch, like in a hurry, like you're at work. We got to get back on the stage, and they're eating sandwiches. And we just break into it, and we just sang our hearts out, singing, out with the truckers and the kickers and the cowboy angels, and a good saloon in every single town. And one of those songs that the Dead could have done or Dylan could have written. I mean, it's up there, like The Weight or whatever. It's like American classic. And we sang it, and she was like, well, that was really good. And so we all went back on the stage and finished the Saturday show thing. And then that night she texted me and said, that was really fun, but I have to remind you that we're doing my version, which is slightly different. And so, but meanwhile, my muscle memory's just stuck.
Yeah.
Because I've been listening to that version of the Graham Parsons with Emmylou song for 50 frickin' years.
Right.
And so the next day we go to sound check for us is like 8 o'clock in the morning. And it's become a tradition at Hardly Strictly Bluegrass for about 5,000 people to show up and get their places on the grass and watch Emmylou's sound check.
Oh,
so it's a fun morning.
Jeez.
But it's early, you get up at 6:30 and get in the vans, go down there and load up, set up your stuff, and then we do the sound check. And so then we're practicing the Grievous Angel song and doing the other version. And anyway,
That's awesome.
But
do you pinch yourself?
Oh well, yeah.
Just with those experiences.
That stage. I recounted this to somebody the other day where I was up there playing with her the first year I ever played with her, 2011, and there's 100,000 people at least, and we're playing, and I'm playing a guitar solo in a song, and I look over to my right to say hi. My wife is sitting in these little VIP seats over there. There's about 20 of them, 20 seats, and she's sort of like smiling ear to ear because she's sitting right between Bonnie Raitt and Linda Ronstadt, like her two heroes of her life, and she's just sitting with them. They're all bundled up, and she's just like,
oh my gosh.
And I look over there to just give her a wink, but between me and her, like 5 feet on my, to my right, is Robert Plant, and he's just standing on the stage dancing, like doing his and I was like, I'm definitely pinching myself.
Yeah.
And I almost stopped playing because I was playing a solo and I was waving at my wife, and then there's Robert Plant over there like doing the Grateful Dead dance.
That's awesome.
And I was like, okay,
yeah,
this is cool. And then every year somebody that's like a hero. Like one year it was Bonnie Raitt. She was like, you guys sounded great. And I'm Bonnie. And I was like, no shit. And last year it was Elvis Costello.
Oh,
he was like,
geez.
that was fantastic. And I'm like, thanks, Elvis. And then I go get in a van and we go back to steerage class on the Southwest flight.
Yeah, exactly.
But that doesn't matter. That's not what matters, right?
Yeah.
And when you're Group 7 on the American flight, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We got to play music.
No, totally.
We got to meet those folks. We got to interact with them.
Yeah.
And confirm that they do walk among us mortals.
Sure.
So anyway,
No,
that was a lot. Ask me any question, I'll talk for like 20 minutes.
it's all good. This is a podcast. That's what it's for.
That's right.
So 2024 was a big year for you.
Yeah.
New album. The Grammy-nominated album was created,
Yep.
right? Which I want to talk about. Like, did that surprise you?
Well, and
how much happened? And
yeah, but I also was I was literally doing all the work, I mean, not all, but the work I was doing was just doing myself. And so this time of year, last year, we were putting the finishing touches on Shamika's record. And so that's amazing that was only a year ago. For instance,
right.
The week before the 30A Songwriter Festival in 2024, I was in the studio with Shamika. And so one day she came in and sang. And the next day she came in and sang. And she sings, she's a great singer. So we got all her lead vocals done. And then the next day we had Jerry Douglas coming in. If a listener doesn't know, he's like the Jimi Hendrix of the dobro. And he put that instrument on the map, really. And he's played with pretty much everybody. Yo-Yo Ma to Elvis Costello to country, and of course bluegrass. Alison Krauss in Union Station, he's a member, Anyway, he's a genius musician. And anybody, Yo-Yo Ma would tell you that. Alison Krauss would tell you that. Elvis Costello, on and on. Lucinda Williams, Emmylou. So he comes in, and I'm the producer. So Jerry Douglas, with all due respect, we're like, can I get you any coffee or anything, Jerry? Anything? And he's just a real, what's the word, a mensch. He's just a guy. Yeah. And he's talking about, I just got off the plane from blah, 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 and I've got to go somewhere else tomorrow, man. God, I don't know. I love it. And I make him sound like Elvis. Man, I love it. Jerry Douglas. But he started playing dobro and also lap steel guitar on these songs, and he was sounding great. But I'm the producer, so I'm the one that has to go, Jerry, can you do that one more time? You're a little flat on the chord. And on the bridge it goes to A minor, not A major. He's like, oh, okay, let me do that one more time. So you're getting this like master class in like, oh, again, this person's just human, but this is how he gets to the genius part. He's got to do it a couple of times. And but then after about an hour, he came in and he listened to some stuff. He goes, this sounded good. He goes, but would you do me a favor, Will? Would you just come in there and get a guitar and play with me?
Oh, nice.
Because I want to just feel like I'm playing with somebody, because we were overdubbing onto the tracks that existed. So I went out there and I just said, take my rhythm guitar and mute it and give me a new track. And so we just created another new feel, and I spent the whole day. So this was my job that day, getting paid to play rhythm guitar with Jerry Douglas. And every once in a while he'd be like, why don't you take the first half of the solo? So next thing I'm like taking a solo, and he's looking at me, and then he's taking it. And I mean, who gets to do that? Yeah. And then the next day we had Luther Dickinson from the North Mississippi All-Stars, who's another person. I've known him since he was about 15, and I'm a lot older than him. But he's brilliant, and he's super charismatic too, and super nice, and he just lights up the room. He really does. Nicest guy in the world on a given day. And then he wanted to use my other old Gibson electric, and just the same thing happened again. I didn't ask. I mean, I was tempted to be like, hey, you want me to play along? I'd already done my parts, and he was like, man, would you mind just coming out here and playing with me, And so I spent the next day.
It's like, okay, well, sure.
Jamming with Luther, and at some point Shamika was like, well, can I sing? So she redid a bunch of her vocals live with us. Jeez. Because, why not? You got the energy of all those people. So those things were happening, and that was just like the first week of January last year. And so that record became a record, Shamika Copeland, Blame It on Eve.
Blame It on Eve, yeah.
And this is the third record in a row that we've made together that have been nominated for Grammys.
Jeez.
But she hasn't won, and so she's got to win this time. But I got nominated by my own name for the very first time in my life as a songwriter, a co-writer of the title track of that record, which I wrote with a guy named John Hahn, who's a dear friend, has worked with Shamika forever, and he's a a really great lyric writer. Like he knows her, and she's one of these people that she's one of the best singers I've ever been around. And I've said to her, many times, do you want to write, get in on this writing? She's like, I'm not a songwriter. Y'all do it. And John and Shamika will talk about what's going on in the world and in her life. And then he'll just start making notes. And then next thing you know, he'll send me like 12 lyrics, and I'm putting music to it and putting melodies to it. It's really fun. It's a fun team. And well, so that's nominated for 3 Grammys.
Yeah.
Contemporary Blues Record of the Year, American Roots Performance, which is for her performance of Blame It on Eve, and Best American Roots Song, Blame It on Eve. And so that's the one that I'm one of the nominees. And, the other nominees are Mark Knopfler, who I'm not sure how a guy from England got in the American Roots category, but that's okay. It's not the roots of Mexico. It's the roots of America. Iron and Wine, duet he did with Fiona Apple. The aforementioned great Sierra Ferrell and Aoife O'Donovan, who's great. So it's a real cool musical category.
That's so cool.
Everybody's like serious, songwriters, and it's fun.
Well, I don't know if you wrote these words or your co-writer, but here's some lyrics from Blame It on Eve. This is like brilliant. So, years ago, back in paradise, Adam got an apple and some bad advice. Next thing you know, he was out on the street. Every day since, Eve's been taking the heat. That's like so brilliant. Yeah,
hurricanes and tropical twisters always getting named after some sister.
I have that.
And the way Shamika sings it, she grew up in Harlem. Her dad is Johnny Clyde Copeland, who was a great blues man, and won a Grammy for a record he made with Robert Cray and Albert Collins. And so she was raised in Harlem, and then she spent the rest of her middle part of her youth in south side of Chicago. So she's been raised in like serious urban. Now she lives out in Southern California, so she's going soft on me.
It's good, yeah.
Her next record's going to be like about yoga or something. Yoga blues.
I mean, if I can read one more.
Yeah.
To continue what you were saying, the next line there is, but the worst winds come from D.C., stealing rights from you and me. And this is great. While a man is tough, a woman's a bitch. Who needs a trial? Burn that witch.
Yeah. Now that all comes from John Hahn.
Is that John? Yeah.
So I just took it and made it into music, but I left all that alone because he had written all of that.
So good.
Yeah. Who needs a trial? Burn that witch.
That's so good.
And it just goes. It's like the last 1,000 years of human history.
100%.
Rolled into one.
100%.
Rolled into a little verse.
What do you enjoy more, though? Performing music, producing, or songwriting?
I like it all. I mean, it all ties in. When I was a kid, we had a great radio station, a great record store in my hometown of Mobile, Alabama. And so, and because we had a great radio station, people came and played concerts. And so I got to see so many great shows before I was like 13. I saw Springsteen play in a 1,000-seat theater for like $4 on my 12th birthday. And he played 2 nights on the Born to Run tour because they were playing his record on the radio. And so he played, it was a market for him.
Trying to promote it,
in his early days. And some, all the, great, I saw John Prine and Jerry Jeff and Keith Sykes, but also like the usual 70s, Kiss, Bad Company, Bachman Turner Overdrive, Leonard Skinner, ZZ Top, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great because you're hearing it on the radio, you see them live, go to the record store, buy the record. It was like, that's the sacred music chain for me,
Well,
I love it all.
Well, the another link in that chain, a very important one, is Jimmy Buffett.
Oh yeah,
right. So
totally.
I guess could I ask you about Bubbles Up and some of that, because that was another big thing. I think we were talking about before we started recording of like your year last year was the album Blame It on Eve, and then sort of the follow-on focus of Bubbles Up after his passing. Right?
Yeah.
So did you co-write that with him?
Yeah. So I'll give you the sort of present situation, the most recent and last thing that we got to do together, and then I'll give you the nickel tour of the 20 years that we worked together. So, Jimmy would call me every couple of years and say, "Are you ready for some homework?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And so he'd send me some stuff, and sometimes it'd be like half-written song in a recorded form or a phone recording or a little home demo. sometimes it would be like a PDF he had attached to an email that just had handwriting and drawings and newspaper articles and, I mean, just stuff like a storyboard, but with no particular. And then he'd talk to me and text me and say, I just want to write something about this. And I'd say, okay. And he goes, and so in the last couple of years, well, 4 years, 2019 to 2023, Jimmy had Merkel cell carcinoma, and that's what took his life. He had it. He had to be treated the whole time. He had to have infusions, I guess, infusions of treatment for it. And so the last 2 albums we made together, we all did all the writing remotely because he just couldn't be with me. So I started to understand that. I was like, you must really trust me to like tell me to run with your idea.
Yeah, seriously.
And I didn't say that to him.
Yeah.
I didn't want to spoil the spell because it was just this nice, friendly thing that had been going on for 18 or 20 years at that point. And so I just said, especially the last 2 times we did that, because we did it over 20 years, starting back in 2004. But the last 2 times we did it, I just understood sort of innately that he just trusted me. He just not distrusted me. He just trusted me. And he wanted my take on his idea. And I felt comfortable enough with myself to trust myself to just do it without feeling like it was a big deal. If it had been any other time in my life, I might have been like, oh, God, Jimmy Buffett wants me to be him. And I this time I understood, he doesn't want me to be him. He wants me to be me. He wants to know someone else's point of view because he was that way.
That's cool.
He was curious about music he didn't know how to play. He was curious about books he hadn't read. He was curious about places he hadn't visited. And so by the end of his life, there weren't that many places he hadn't visited. And there wasn't that much music he hadn't listened to. And there wasn't that many, But he wanted to keep going in that way. But it really was a special experience for me to be trusted like that taught me to trust myself more.
That's awesome.
And that's really what happened. So I just sat down and sketched out Bubbles Up one day during the Christmas holidays of 2022 and sent it to him like a phone recording, nothing fancy. And then I sent him 2 more, and they're all on the record. But it was like one afternoon because I didn't, and that was another thing he would do. Is a month before he was going to make a record, he would call you, or 3 weeks before, and say, "Are you ready for some homework?" And you'd say, "Yeah," and he'd say, "Okay, well, I can't be with you, but run with these ideas. I'm gonna send these other ones to Mac McAnally or Peter Mayer or whoever."
Jeez.
And I'd say, "Well, when is the record being made?" He'd be like, "In 3 weeks." So you're like, "Okay, so we're doing this, like, cancel everything else I have going on and do this." He's like, "Well, yeah." And then you mark on your calendar. Now you know when the sessions are going to be because I played on the stuff too. So anyway,
that's awesome.
Bubbles Up I got great notes from him, but no musical direction. Just a couple of lines, like 3 lines, and it was handwritten, stuff crossed out, and then just some like direction. Like I want this to be not about the music, but just about what the song should feel like and be like. And then when I sent him the phone recording, he literally wrote back, "I've pretty much got it memorized." He texted me. He said, "Bubbles Up is great. I can't wait to work on it myself. And I'm saving the other 2 ideas like pralines on my pillow for dessert." And you never get a note like that from a co-writer like in Nashville,
right,
or like L.A. It would always be a note from somebody of way less stature than Jimmy Buffett, just another writer, and you send them something and they'd say, "Yeah, it's a pretty good idea, but the bridge is awkward and the rhymes need work, and it's not the right key for your voice, and all these critical things."
Critiques. Yeah.
So Jimmy's thing was more like, if he liked something, then he wanted you to know that he really liked it.
That's cool.
And it wasn't blowing smoke up your skirt. It was, because I also knew that if he didn't like it, he just wouldn't say anything, and the next thing I know, there'd be a song with the same title written by Jimmy and Mac McAnally.
Yeah.
Because he would just do that. He knew, no, what are we going to do? Be mad at him?
Yeah, yeah.
He was right. It's his.
Yeah.
It's his record. It's his project. He's just bringing us in to try stuff, and that's part of the process. But it sure was a joyful way to do that work, and there was nobody else like that.
Well, what I love about it is if you just read like the track listing on the album, it's like Bubbles Up. Okay, is that a drinking song?
Right.
Is it about champagne? Whatever. And then you get into it, and it's a symbol of life, being disoriented in the deep sea and not knowing where to go. And then, follow the bubbles up. It'll reorientate you. It's a brilliant analogy, I guess it is.
And it's
so thoughtful.
It's about affection for other people.
Yeah.
And wanting to help them.
Yeah. No, it's
wanting to help somebody that you care about.
Yeah. No, it's
which is super simple, but it's necessary.
Yeah, it's like, when your compass is spinning and you're lost on the way, like a leaf in the wind, friend, hear me when I say, bubbles up.
Yeah.
They will point you towards home. No matter how deep or far you roam, they will show you the surface. Yeah, good. So good.
Yeah, and a lot of that, he sent me these beautiful notes that I was able to just sort of run with, and that just came out of me through what he had sent me, like, so fast. I mean, every once in a while you get a song like that, and you almost don't trust it. But I also knew I was writing it with him, so I was going to go ahead and send him my first impression. So he wasn't left out of the loop.
Yeah.
Because he was the one going to chemotherapy, and he, so I pictured him in on his private jet listening on his earbuds with his phone, because I think that's what he did.
Jeez. And didn't Paul McCartney have some good feedback on that as well?
So McCartney and Buffett both had homes in like Sag Harbor, Long Island, and they had become friends in the later days of Jimmy's life. And so when McCartney heard that Jimmy was, taken to the bed, basically, like in hospice kind of, he went over there and visited him, and then he came over with his guitar and played songs for him all night.
Oh, no way.
Private one-on-one concert with Paul McCartney.
Oh, my gosh.
And then Paul asked him, aren't you working on a record? And Jimmy said, yeah, let me play you something. So first thing he played him was Bubbles Up.
Okay.
And Paul said, that was one of the things he put, when Jimmy died, Paul's post was like, he was my friend, he was a great guy, and he played me a great new song called Bubbles Up, and it's the best vocal I've ever heard him do.
Oh, that's so cool.
So it was on, all the social media stuff.
Yeah.
And so when I read that, I was like, wow, Paul McCartney likes our song.
That's so
Good
cool.
Lord.
No, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, congrats on that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, where were you when you found out that he had passed?
I was at home, and I was just, looking at my phone, looking at the news, and there it was. All of a sudden, they kept it under wraps because they didn't want him to have to just talk about it. He wanted to just be with his family,
Sure,
and take the treatment as long as he could, which was a long time. He was a strong guy physically. He was in good shape, and so a lot, nobody really knew until the very last. I mean, I know Mike Utley and Mac McAnally were called in to his bedside in the last, say, 36 hours of his life, and they have a whole story about that, which is amazing. But I won't talk out of school about that. But he knew he was sick, but I really do think he was such an optimist that I think he thought he was going to go on tour in the fall,
right,
instead of passing away on September 1st.
Right. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned when you were talking about him earlier, he was curious about this, curious about that. So this podcast is inspired by Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
And the importance of curiosity.
Right.
I guess at this point in your career, what are you most curious about?
I'm always interested to see what gets me inspired next, to where there's actually like a new song that will propel. Once I write a song that feels like there's a switch that goes off in my head that says, okay, that could be, I can put that out. Then all of a sudden the dominoes start to fall. And I'm not a big time artist, but I'm just a long time artist. So it will happen. There will be a song, and the dominoes will start to fall. There'll be older songs that all of a sudden pop their heads up and say, hey,
Sure.
Remember me? I fit with that song. And all of a sudden I've got like a record in mind. And, we supposedly live in this time post-album world or blah,
Right.
blah, blah. But
Right.
I don't really care, because to me that's one of the it's like when you find a book you love. So I'm always reading, I'm always listening, And when you ask me about new artists, I mean, I live in Nashville, but the only one that just popped into my head was Sierra Ferrell, because I listen to a lot of old music too. Because there's just whatever direction you head in music or reading, especially with those two things, you could go back in time and never read everything or listen to everything, or you could try to stay current and have the same thing. So I try to juggle both. I try to listen to new stuff, listen to old stuff. I love records, like records, you know. So old records are pretty awesome because they're perfect. You know, they're made on tape, and old jazz records especially because they're made on tape.
Right.
They're made with everybody in the room at the same time. They literally capture a moment, and then they were put on vinyl. And so I love those because you're really hearing improvisation, interaction with people all in the same room at the same time, usually just on like one or two tracks.
Yeah.
And
no, that's great.
And so I love that, just that experience, and I find that exhilarating. And I also do that work with veterans and first responders, and the biggest part of it is called Warrior Path, and it's a post-traumatic growth program. And the writing part is just a little part of it, but it's a vital part of the program. And I don't even know how to explain why, but I can tell you what happens is that when somebody, especially somebody that's experienced trauma and is experiencing post-traumatic stress, that their story becomes harder to tell because it's full of shame, and it's full of triggers and rage, and you just get to where you don't want to go there. No, you don't want anybody to see that.
Sure.
Nobody will understand. And this program puts people together that all have a similar background and similar experiences, and all the teachers as well. There's nobody that hasn't experienced what they've experienced. And so when somebody goes in the first night or day and they're not ready to talk yet, one of the guides can say, "Let me tell you my story." And then all of a sudden the person's like, "Really? You were in Kandahar?
Right.
2007?"
Right.
And you're like, "And you went home and got divorced and became homeless," or what, you know, or drank, you know, whatever it is.
Right.
And because trauma really makes people believe that they're all alone and that no one else has experienced what they've experienced. And that's the part where you get isolated, and that's when people get suicidal. So
is there an example of somebody that you had a session with and workshop that you're like, I'm never going to forget that moment? Yeah.
There's many. I mean, it happens so often that it's almost become commonplace to have someone tell you that last week I've had the inside of the barrel of a gun described, what it feels like when you've got it in your mouth and you're running your tongue along the inside, like pondering that moment when you're going to pull the trigger. I don't mean to be horrifying, and then that person's just sitting there with me, like talking matter-of-factly about it, because one of the things they're learning is that there's no shame in that. That if you've gotten beyond that moment of suicidal iteration, as they call it, and you don't want to die anymore, then you need to get more healthy about mental health and physical health and everything, so that you can continue to tell your story and make a connection with other people, so that you don't feel alone, and you aren't alone in that moment when you're down and you feel like, I'm so alone, what it would do the world a favor if I was gone, when we all know that that's not the effect that suicide has, especially if somebody who has a family, and you know the repercussions go through the generations. So what I do is not that important. It's just part of it. When people have been cracked open to tell their story, and for people that haven't experienced this kind of trauma, it might be like, why can't they just tell their story? It's like, well, it's just and it's not just soldiers and first responders, it's anybody.
Sure.
And that's another thing that they're learning too, so that when they're in the airport and people are like, "Thank you for your service, man," you know, and sometimes they're really rattled by that. They don't necessarily want to be told they're a hero. It's interesting. I mean, and I'm not trying to lump people into a category. Just saying, there's so many things you learn every time about other people, because the job of the Songwriting with Soldiers post-traumatic growth writer is just to listen and try to make someone else's words into a song without putting yourself in there as much as possible. And it's a really like heavy exercise, but it's also a blast.
That's amazing.
There's so much serious talk and like heart expressing of things they've never told themselves or anybody before. And then 5 minutes later, everybody's laughing their heads off, because what a relief
Right.
to express yourself.
Right.
And it's taught me that what I've done my whole life has been this privilege to be open enough to do it, so that I could do it, and then to be lucky enough to make a living at it on my own terms. It's a miracle. That's all.
Thanks for
it is.
sharing. Yeah. That's awesome. So we talked about last year, and Jimmy Buffett and the Red Dirt Boys with Emmylou Harris. I guess for you as Will, the artist, where are you at as an artist today, and where do you want to be? And then as you look to 2025, what do you have planned besides buying a suit for the Grammys?
I put a record out in May 2024, and again, all that other stuff was going on too. So that record, maybe got a little bit overshadowed, but it's called For the Life of Me, and I'm real proud of it. It said a lot of things I wanted to say, and told a lot of stories that, not just for me, like stories about other.
Yeah.
There's a song on there about the Clotilda ship that brought in the last people from the west coast of Africa to slavery in America.
Oh, geez.
And which happened in Mobile, my hometown. And so I wanted to tell that story, and we wrote that song for Shamika, and that song was on a record of hers, but I wanted to do a version of it too, because it just meant a lot to me that story's from where I'm from. It's such a heavy American story.
Right.
Nothing like that exactly was happening much anywhere else but the American South at that time, and it particularly came into Mobile. And there's so much history behind it, I don't want to go into some kind of historian lecture mode about it, but it's a fascinating story. And that community where those people that have been brought from Africa, that's still there, Africa Town is still there, and right on the outskirts of Mobile. And people were brought there, separated out, sold off into slavery. And then after the Civil War, as many of them that could come back, came back, and they settled where they had been brought to and called it Africa Town.
Jeez.
And it's still there.
Jeez.
I mean, talk about the spirit of survival and the spirit of resilience. That community is like, they've taken everything, and of course they fought in all the wars, served, and it's just this little tight-knit community. And of course it's shrinking and it's struggling, but it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I want to do a collection of all the songs I did with Jimmy Buffett.
Nice.
There's 20 of them that we worked on together over 20 years. So that'd be a big project.
Amazing.
And because I can sort of promote out to the world that if you want me to come do the show where I play the songs and tell the stories, like in a setting that's appropriate for it, like a theater kind of thing. So I want to do that. And then I've got all these songs. My roots go back to rock and roll world, not like metal or anything, but like I was in a band called Will and the Bushmen in the 80s, and we got signed to a major label deal in the late 80s and went up to Woodstock, New York, and made a record, and had all these great experiences. And it didn't really amount to that much, except that it also was the springboard for me to just have a whole lifetime of being a songwriter. And so it's very important. It amounted to my life.
Sure, yeah.
But getting to go to Bearsville, which is the studio in Woodstock that was started by the Bear, who was Bob Dylan's manager, Albert Grossman. And so when we were there, Grossman had died, but his wife, Sally, who's the beautiful model on the cover of Bringing It All Back Home, Bob Dylan's record, where he's on the front with his record collection out, and he's kind of sitting there with his hair sticking up in the kind of purple shirt, and she's sitting in the background like, like whatever, And she was the owner of the studio when 24-year-old me was there making a record. And I turned 25 during the recording session, so one night we're out at this restaurant, and I'm having a birthday dinner, and she sent over a bottle of champagne, and she came over and kind of was like, "Good luck, kid." She's like, "You're going to need it." And so those, and Alice Cooper was there trying to make a comeback.
Oh, my gosh.
And so he was making a record with the guys who were the hot producers of the time, who had just done Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, their first record, the record with Paradise City and that other song about Sweet Child of Mine. And they were there trying to make Alice Cooper's comeback record. So one day, we had been told by the studio manager, who was this wonderful Scottish guy named Ian, and he had been telling us, "Fellas, I'm sorry, you can't talk to Alice Cooper, so just leave him alone." And so we were like, okay. So one day he comes in and goes, "Fellas, will anybody play ping pong with Alice Cooper?" And so we were like, okay, we'll play ping pong with Alice Cooper. So the next thing you know, we're playing ping pong with Alice Cooper, and then John Anderson from Yes, the lead singer of Yes, "I'll be the roundabout." We had been told not to talk to him, And he was literally riding up to the studio on a white horse, like, you know, he's in Lord of the Rings or something. And he had requested a white horse to ride up to the studio on. So we were like, well, this is the most pretentious asshole we've ever heard of in our lives. And then he comes into the studio. Remember, we've been told not to talk to him. He comes in the studio and he's like, could I bum a fag? And we were like, you smoke? The lead singer of Yes with that beautiful choir boy voice. And so we had a cigarette we gave him. And we said, but you got to stand here and smoke it and talk to us and answer our questions. He was like, okay. So, and he said, I quit smoking a long time ago, but whenever I finish a Yes record, I smoke one cigarette to celebrate my vocals are done. And so we said, okay, did you know John Lennon? You know, back in the day, he's like, well, I used to see him at this club we used to play.
Oh my
and then
gosh.
like, what about Jimi Hendrix? He's like, well, I used to see him play all the time in the clubs, you know, and he just told us all these great stories. And also, Rick Danko from the band was around, and the band is huge heroes of ours. And they were in a terrible shape. Like, they were all messed up, and Richard Manuel had just died. And so seeing a guy like that, you know, like when his son had passed away, they were like they were. I always feel bad saying this, but Danko and his son were like drug buddies, and his son died of an overdose. And so we saw Danko; he was like mourning his son, but also like completely still using.
Oh, jeez.
And so we walked in the bar, and that was a little bit like okay,
Right.
what not to do. Try to avoid, and I understand addiction's not something you just don't do.
Yeah.
You know, but I've been lucky in that way. But
Yeah.
but anyway, that was where I started, and so that was a long answer, right? So, so my roots go back to that.
good.
So I've always got this pile of songs that
Yeah.
I've written that are just kind of like melodic, catchy, cool, like electric guitar, bass and drums. The Beatles, the Kinks, the Who, the band, Little Feat, you know, Rolling Stones, rock music. And so I really want to make a record like that that's just for the joy of that, like 2 guitars, bass, drums, a couple of harmonies, a tambourine, and just put it on and
Perfect.
make coffee and turn it up and vacuum the house or whatever. You know, there's many uses of music, but so I want to do those 2 things: all the Buffett story songs kind of thing, and then just catalog these what I call melodic rock songs, pop rock songs. You know, so those are
Sounds good.
yeah, and
Sounds like
and
a
so
good
there's
year.
always going to be what always happens to me is I write some songs though that are like very meaningful to me, and I end up making this real sincere, meaningful album, which is great. But also, I think it's important for artists to go back and listen to the records that they actually keep going back to.
Sure.
And think about what do you want to give people that they might listen to.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to give them a Sunday morning record or a Saturday night record,
Right.
or like Wednesday afternoon on the way home from work? You know,
Yeah.
What is it that you want to say? Like, because what you say, it's important, but like the way you say it too. So anyway.
Well, we look forward to that.
Oh, thank you.
And on behalf of all the fans of you and everybody that you play with, we appreciate you and your music.
Well, I'm the luckiest guy in the world to get to do it.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. Incredible life. Would you play some music for us?
Absolutely.
All right, Will, it's a pleasure, man.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. All right.
Well, my name's Will Kimbrough. This is a song called Bubbles Up that I wrote with Jimmy Buffett. And this song started around Christmas time, 2022. And we recorded it about a month later in January 23. And then Jimmy passed September 1st, 23. And so they got this song out to people, thought it would mean something to them, especially in light of the fact that Jimmy had passed away. And it sure has. I mean, it's been something I've enjoyed singing all over the place. And started in my phone with the text from Jimmy, and then it went from there to a phone recording I sent back to him from my living room. And it was a wonderful experience, and probably the most creative use of iPhones I've ever been part of. That Jimmy was on it. He was into it. And so it's a beautiful experience for me. And the right place to sing a Jimmy Buffett song is on the Gulf of Mexico. So anyway. When this world starts a reeling from that pressure drop feeling,
just treading water each day. There's a way to feel better, be well set to weather the storms till the sun shines again. When your compass is spinning and you're lost on the way, like a leaf in the wind, friend, and me when I say bubbles up, they will point you toward home. No matter how deep, how far you roam, they will show you the surface, the plot, and the purpose. So when the journey gets long, just know that you are loved. There is light up above, and the joy is always enough. Oh, bubbles up. When to my friends who were jolly, when melancholy knocks, sometimes they let her in. They sit and share stories of flops and of glories, and it ain't half as bad as the bends. Sometimes living is a struggle multiplied double, but they love it too much for the party to end. Well, bubbles up, they will point you toward home. No matter how deep, how far you roam, they will show you the surface, the plot, and the purpose. So when the journey gets long, just know that you are loved. There is light up above, and the joy is always enough. Bubbles up. So let's pop a cork to the rough and the right, to the bright blazing day and the sweet starry night. Bubbles up, they will point us towards home. No matter how deep, how far we roam, they will show you the purpose, the plot, and the purpose. So when the journey gets long, just know that you are loved. There's light up above, and the joy's always enough. See, bubbles up. Bubbles up. Yeah, all right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Will Kimbrough here with you, and this is the title track from my 2024 album called For the Life of Me, and this song just came to me after talking to an old friend, and I love you, old friend. For the life of me, I can't see the world the way you do. But I'd bet $1,000 it's the same damn way from me to you. And it's probably just a circle that the sad old human race was cursed to walk. The irony that we are simply animals who learn to drive and talk. Now I greet each new sunrise delightedly. While you look down your nose ever spitefully. I have searched high and low, trying so hard to see, but I cannot understand for the life of me. You see blue and I see black. It's empathy we lack and claim to want. While the history we seem doomed to repeat is here to terrify and haunt. Yeah. For the life of me, I cannot sympathize with your belief, nor you with mine. We would rather fiddle while the whole thing burns. Yeah, brother, that's just fine. Now I greet each new sunrise delightedly. While you look down your nose ever spitefully. I have searched high and low, trying so hard to see, but I cannot understand for the life of me. You may search high and low, trying so hard to see, while I look down my nose ever spitefully. Though we search high and low, trying so hard to see, we cannot understand. You cannot understand, and I cannot understand for the life of me.
Yeah.